Kevin started driving for Uber 6 months ago because his salary was not keeping up with inflation. He figured he would drive 15 hours a week after his full-time job, make an extra $1,000 a month, and finally get ahead on his credit card debt. The math seemed simple. 15 hours times 4 weeks times $20 per hour equals $1,200 a month. Easy money. 6 months later, Kevin has made approximately $6,200 in gross Uber income. He feels productive. He feels like he is hustling, grinding, doing what successful people do. But last week, Kevin actually calculated what those 6 months cost him. He drove 4,200 miles for Uber. At the IRS standard mileage rate of 67 cents per mile, which accounts for gas, depreciation, maintenance, and insurance, his vehicle costs were approximately $2,800. His net income was $3,400 over 6 months. He worked approximately 360 hours. His actual hourly wage was $9.44, less than minimum wage in his state. But it gets worse. Kevin did not account for the time spent waiting for rides, cleaning his car, driving to high-demand areas, or managing the app between passengers. He did not account for the extra stress that made him less productive at his primary job, which led to a poor performance review and a smaller raise than his colleagues received. He did not account for the weekend he spent sick because his immune system was compromised from chronic sleep deprivation. He did not account for the toll on his relationship when he canceled date nights 3 weeks in a row because surge pricing was high. Kevin made $3,400. Kevin lost far more than that in ways he never calculated. And Kevin is not alone. He is the rule, not the exception. If you have a side hustle that feels like a second job but does not seem to be getting you ahead, if you're exhausted and still broke despite grinding nights and weekends, make sure to hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up if this helps you out. What I am about to show you is the hidden math of the side hustle economy, why more work often produces less wealth, why the costs you are not tracking are eating your profits, and why the entire narrative around side hustles might be keeping you poor while making you feel productive. I call it the side hustle squeeze, and once you see the real numbers, you will never look at your extra income the same way again. Here's the thing about side hustles that the Instagram entrepreneurs and YouTube gurus will never tell you. Most side hustles have a negative return on investment when you properly account for all costs. According to a 2023 survey from Bankrate, approximately 39% of American adults have a side hustle. The average reported side hustle income is about $810 per month. That sounds helpful, almost $10,000 a year in extra income. But this figure is gross income, not net income, and the gap between those two numbers is where the side hustle squeeze lives. Let me show you the real math using common side hustles. Delivery driving for DoorDash, Uber Eats, or Instacart. The average reported earnings are $20 to $25 per hour in gross pay. But a comprehensive study from the Economic Policy Institute found that after accounting for vehicle costs, payroll taxes that gig workers pay out of pocket, and unpaid time between deliveries, the actual median wage for gig drivers falls to approximately $10 to $12 per hour. And for many drivers, it drops into single digits. That's before you factor in the accelerated depreciation on your vehicle, which is a real cost that most people ignore because it does not show up as a weekly expense. A car that lasts 200,000 miles will hit that number years earlier if you are driving 15,000 extra miles annually for delivery work. You are converting your car's value into small weekly payments while telling yourself you are earning money. Freelance and consulting work often advertises rates of $50, $75, or $100 per hour, but these headline rates disguise the true hourly return. For every hour of paid client work, most freelancers spend an additional 1 to 2 hours on unpaid activities: marketing, proposals, invoicing, client communication, revisions, administrative tasks, and the learning curve required to stay competitive. A freelancer billing $50 per hour who spends equal time on unpaid work is actually earning $25 per hour, and that's before self-employment taxes of approximately 15%, which brings the effective rate down to around $21. If you are leaving a salaried job that pays the equivalent of $35 per hour with benefits, your $50 per hour freelance rate is actually a pay cut disguised as a raise. Here's where it gets really interesting, because the costs I've described so far are just the visible ones. The invisible costs, opportunity cost, health cost, and cognitive cost, are often larger than the financial costs and almost never calculated. Opportunity cost is what you give up by choosing to spend time on your side hustle. If you work 15 hours a week on a side hustle that nets you $8 per hour after all expenses, you're earning $120 weekly. But what if you spent those 15 hours on skill development that increased your primary income by $5,000 a year? What if you spent them on rest and recovery that improved your performance at your main job, leading to promotions and raises? What if you spent them on relationships that opened doors to better opportunities? The $8 per hour you are earning is not the question. The question is whether $8 per hour is the best return on your time. And for most people, the answer is clearly no. A 2019 study from Harvard Business Review found that workers who invested time in skill development saw earnings increases of approximately 10 to 20% over 5 years. 15 hours a week invested in learning a high-value skill, coding, data analysis, sales, negotiation, could increase a $60,000 salary by $6,000 to $12,000 annually permanently. That's a far higher return than any gig economy side hustle will ever provide. Health cost is equally significant and almost never factored into side hustle math. Chronic sleep deprivation, which affects the majority of people working full-time jobs plus side hustles, has been linked to decreased cognitive function, weakened immune systems, increased risk of chronic disease, and reduced workplace productivity. A 2022 study from the Rand Corporation estimated that sleep deprivation costs the U.S. economy over $400 billion annually in lost productivity. On an individual level, working an extra 15 to 20 hours per week means sleeping less, exercising less, and recovering less. The productivity you lose at your primary job, the sick days you accumulate, the long-term health problems you are seeding, these are costs that will come due eventually, and they will dwarf whatever you earned delivering pizzas on Tuesday nights. The third invisible cost is cognitive cost, the mental bandwidth consumed by managing a side hustle that is no longer available for higher value thinking. Research on decision fatigue shows that humans have limited cognitive resources each day, and every decision depletes that resource pool. Managing a side hustle means making dozens of additional decisions daily. Which gigs to accept, how to route deliveries, when to work, how to handle difficult clients, where to find new customers. Each decision burns bandwidth that could otherwise be spent on strategic thinking about your career, creative problem solving at your main job, or investment research that could generate passive returns. The person grinding a side hustle is often too mentally depleted to pursue the opportunities that would actually change their financial trajectory. They're so busy working in their life that they have no capacity left to work on their life. And here's the cruelest part of the side hustle squeeze. The people who can least afford to waste time on low-return activities are exactly the people most likely to be squeezed. If you are working a side hustle because your primary income is not enough, you're probably exhausted, probably stressed, probably not in an optimal position to evaluate whether your side hustle is actually helping or hurting. You see the deposits in your bank account and you feel productive. You don't see the invisible costs accumulating, the health declining, the opportunities missed, the main career stagnating because you have no energy left to pursue advancement. The side hustle feels like a solution. For many people, it's actually part of the trap.
Now, you might be thinking that not all side hustles are created equal, that some genuinely do build wealth and create opportunities. And you are right. The distinction is between low-leverage side hustles that trade time for money at low rates and high-leverage activities that build assets, skills, or systems. Driving for Uber is low leverage. Your income is directly capped by your available hours. The rate per hour is low and getting lower as more drivers compete, and you build nothing of lasting value. Creating a course, building a software product, or developing a content platform is potentially high leverage. The initial time investment can generate returns that persist and compound long after the work is done. But here's what most people do not realize. High-leverage opportunities typically require exactly what the side hustle squeeze eliminates: significant uninterrupted time, mental clarity, creative energy, and the financial runway to wait for returns that are not immediate. The person grinding 20 hours per week on gig work to make rent does not have the bandwidth to build a high-leverage asset. They are stuck in low-leverage work precisely because they lack the resources to pursue anything better, and the low-leverage work consumes the time and energy that might otherwise create those resources. This is the squeeze: working more to earn less, too exhausted to escape, watching the side hustle promise of financial freedom become another form of financial prison. Here's how to actually evaluate whether your side hustle is building wealth or draining it. First, calculate your true hourly rate by tracking every minute spent on side hustle activities, not just the paid work, but the unpaid administration, commuting, waiting, learning, and recovery time. Divide your actual net income after all expenses by your total hours. If that number is below your primary job's effective hourly rate, you are going backwards. Second, audit the invisible costs by honestly assessing how your side hustle affects your sleep, health, relationships, performance at your main job, and availability for higher value opportunities. These costs are real, even if they do not appear on a ledger. Third, apply the replacement test. If you spent the same hours on skill development, networking, or rest, would you likely see a higher return over the next 5 years? For most low-leverage side hustles, the answer is yes. Fourth, identify your escape velocity, the point at which your side hustle becomes high leverage rather than time for money. If you cannot articulate a clear path from where you are to passive or scalable income, you are not building an asset. You are just working a second job at a lower rate than your first one. Right now, you probably see yourself as someone who is hustling, grinding, doing what it takes to get ahead. That identity feels productive and virtuous in a culture that celebrates busyness as a proxy for value. But there's another way to see it. You might be working harder than ever while building less wealth than ever, exhausting yourself on low-return activities that feel productive but actually consume the resources you need to pursue high-return opportunities. The side hustle economy promised financial freedom. For many people, it delivered financial treadmills that spin faster and faster without going anywhere. Kevin is still driving for Uber. He's too tired to think about alternatives and too committed to the sunk costs of his vehicle depreciation to walk away. He tells himself he'll figure out something better next month, but next month never comes because he's always too busy working to think about how to stop working. The side hustle squeeze has him exactly where it wants him, generating $9 per hour for platforms that take 30%, while he slowly burns through his car, his health, and his chance at something better. Stop measuring your hustle by how busy you are. Start measuring it by what you're actually building. I've spent way too much time thinking about this stuff, so you don't have to. If this changed how you see your side hustle, hit that like button and subscribe. I'll see you in the next one.